Ave Maris Stella.
Hello and welcome back to Vatican II in a Year. This is your host, Father Matthew Schneider. I am a priest of the Legionaries of Christ and a theology professor. This is a podcast on the Star Cross Production Network at sqpn.com. Today we're on day 223 in Recovering Apostolic Acts Testament 25 to 27 on lay people have a right to apostolate of their own. That is not really what it's about. We'll cover it later on. As I noted before, I did these summaries scanning it back fall 2024, and this one is not really that accurate. If you want to follow along, we have a reading plan and more details at sqpn.com/Vatican or frmatthewlc.com/Vatican. Yesterday we spoke about apostolates should be united to the church, and bishops should oversee apostolates and promote them. Today we're going to end the topic of Chapter 5, External Relationships, and the summary is that clergy and religious must respect lay apostolate for 25, and then 26 and 27 are about we need cooperation of lay apostolate both inside and outside the church. So really that is a much better summary than what I said at first. I don't know why I put that down there on the reading plan. That is not really that accurate. I am not perfect, and I admit that when I was doing it back in September 2024, I read through them quickly. So let's get straight into paragraph 25. It has three subparagraphs. A is about priests and bishops must respect the lay apostolate. B, about priests are able to promote the lay apostolate to do so. C, basically just apply A and B to religious as well, not just the priests. So let's begin. 25A. The bishops, pastors of parishes, and other priests of both branches of the clergy should keep in mind that the right and duty to exercise this apostolate is common to all the faithful, both clergy and laity, and that the laity should also have their own roles in building up the church. For this reason, they should work fraternally with the laity in and for the church and take special care of the laypersons in these apostolic works. One little note here that might not be obvious, they say both branches of the clergy, so I'd assume that what they're talking about is secular or religious clergy, secular or diocesan clergy and religious clergy. So like myself, I live in the Diocese of Hartford, Archdiocese of Hartford, but I'm not a priest of the Archdiocese of Hartford. I'm a priest of the Legionaries of Christ. And so the Archbishop of Hartford has some role, but he can't just tell me, oh, go and take this parish. My provincial has to say that, which is the equivalent of a bishop, but he's still just a priest, and it's not a permanent position like a bishop. But my provincial would have to say that as opposed to the archbishop here, whereas the diocesan priest, he's responsible just to this archbishop. And as a religious, we generally stay within our province, which is usually much larger than a diocese. For example, my religious community, the Legionaries of Christ, Canada, U.S., South Korea, and the Philippines are all one province. There's only one community in the South Korea and the Philippines. I've never been there, but I've been in many different of our communities in Canada and the U.S. I've probably been to most of them at this point in my life. I haven't been to all of them. I know we have one in Louisiana, one in Houston, never been to those cities. Well, I've never been to New Orleans. I passed through northern Louisiana when I was driving one time. So those kind of things, right? So that's what we mean there. And we in the clergy remember that all have a right to their own apostolate. It is every layperson's right and duty, from the littlest kid to the oldest grandma. And we can't just make them our mere assistants. That's a temptation I think a lot of priests can have, is to turn lay people into just their assistants, just so, the lay people help me do my apostolate. No, the lay people have their own apostolate, and they're not just there as our assistants. And there needs to be a more equitable cooperation. The note here is there's a fraternal cooperation between lay people and clergy. Fraternal is just Latin brotherly, so it means a much more equal, not a kind of like, I'm in charge, you listen to me kind of cooperation, but we're equals, let's talk cooperation. So let's move on to B, which is about priests able to promote lay apostolates should do so. This is a lot of what the Legionaries of Christ, my own religious community, does. I myself am teaching in the seminary, not quite as focused on this, but I would say compared to most other diocesan priests or other religious, we focus on this quite a bit. So let's read it. B. Special care should be taken to select priests who are capable of promoting particular forms of the apostolate of the laity and are properly trained. Those who are engaged in this ministry represent the hierarchy in their pastoral activity by virtue of the mission they receive from the hierarchy. Always adhering faithfully to the spirit and teaching of the church, they should promote proper relations between laity and hierarchy. They should devote themselves to nourishing the spiritual life and an apostolic attitude in the Catholic societies entrusted them. They should contribute their wise counsel to the apostolic activity of the associations and promote their undertakings. Through continuous dialogue with the laity, these priests should carefully investigate which forms make apostolic activity more fruitful. They should promote the spirit of unity within the association as well as between it and others. So we need priests who are going to promote the lay apostolate. So much more can happen in the church if there are lay people doing this apostolate. And there's some lay people who go really in depth in one specific thing. For example, as I'm recording this over the summer, I'm living at our Legion Seminary here in Connecticut. And today, actually, as I'm recording this, not today as you're listening, there's a layperson here who's giving our candidates, postulants, the guys who are discerning for the summer where they're going to enter the community, she's giving them a discernment course. So she came in, I think it's like a 2 or 3 day discernment course, and she's giving it while I'm doing this. If you're in the Legion, you might know exactly which day I recorded this, or at least narrow it down, because I definitely recorded these beforehand. But we see her doing that, and that was promoted because other priests encourage her, and other legionary priests and other lay people encourage her to do that. In fact, I spoke with her, and she knew Janet McLaughlin, who had done the introduction for this document. And when I mentioned to her, because I had met her before, she's like, "Oh, Janet mentioned that, but she didn't mention that it was you were doing the podcast." So she was kind of surprised. So, anyways, I was living in the community, the legionary community near where she lives for a while. Anyway, so we need to promote that proper relationship between laity and priests that build up the apostolate's skills and spiritual life, make the apostolate more fruitful. Because only by training these lay people, building them up spiritually, building up their apostolate skills, are we able to have fruitful apostolate. If we just have lay people who don't know what they're doing and they're walking around like the blind leading the blind, we're not going to have a great amount of fruit from that apostolate. But if you have lay people who do the training, who develop their own spiritual life, we are going to have much more fruitful apostolate to save many more souls. So let's move on to subparagraph C, which is pretty straightforward. It basically just applies what's above to religious as well as priests. Let's read it. Finally, in keeping with the spirit and norms of their societies, religious brothers and sisters should value the apostolic works of the laity and willingly devote themselves to promoting lay enterprises. They should also strive to support, uphold, and fill priestly functions. As I said, I think this is pretty straightforward. It basically just says, hey, lay people, brothers, religious brothers and sisters should do similarly to priests and also promote the priestly function, also work with the priests there. So moving on to paragraph 26. Paragraph 26 has 2 sections. We're going to talk about subparagraphs A and B, which are on councils to promote and coordinate apostolates. And subparagraph C is about the dicastery for laity, family, and life, that the Vatican should establish this dicastery, which it did in 1967. So let's read A and B. In dioceses, insofar as possible, there should be councils which assist the apostolic work of the Church, either in the field of evangelization and sanctification, or in the charitable, social, and other spheres. And here it is fitting that the clergy and religious should cooperate with the laity. While preserving the proper character and autonomy of each organization, these councils will be able to promote the mutual coordination of various lay associations and enterprises. B. Councils of this type should be established as far as possible also on the parochial, interparochial, and interdiocesan level, as well as the national and international sphere. A word here you might not be super familiar with. Parochial is just Latin for like parish-esque or relating to the parish. So an interparochial would be relating to a bunch of parishes, between parishes, and interdiocesan or between dioceses. The word parochial sometimes used for parochial vicar. In the U.S., it's more common to say assistant pastor, but parochial vicar is also an equivalent term that means functionally the same thing. Some people argue it's slightly different, but it's the same basic thing. And so we need these councils because they can help us cooperate. We don't want a bunch of apostolates in a diocese doing the same thing 3 times and missing other areas. And when we do these kind of councils and coordination, we can hopefully organize that. Now, obviously, we can make these where coordination and paperwork takes up too much time. That's an issue too. But this idea of that is helpful. And I also think that having these kind of things, these coordination things, can also be very helpful for promoting lay people to do apostolate. Because a lot of times you have a lay person or a family or something like that, and they're like, hey, our priest encourages us, we should go and do some kind of apostolate. And they're like, oh, I don't know what to do. But if there's like a list at the back of the parish, I know like my parents' parish, they have a big list of all the ministries of the church, from sacristy to lectors to St. Vincent de Paul to teaching CCD to hosting different social events to help people out, to fundraising for the poor, things like that, all kinds of things. in the parish, and there's a big list at the back of the church, kind of in the gathering space there. And that can often help people who are kind of interested. Hey, I want to do something. Well, what can I do? And this various levels are noted here: parish, multi-parish, diocesan, multi-diocese, etc. So paragraph C is talking about making some kind of Vatican office for it. It was called the Pontifical Council for the Laity from 1967 to 2016, and then it merged with the Pontifical Council of Family to make what's now the Dicastery for Laity, Family, and Life. So it doesn't use this term, it just says something. So this was published in 1965, and relatively soon afterwards, 2 years later, it was founded, and then in 2016, it was merged with the idea of the family, because laity and family, obviously, we're talking about family, talking about marriage. Those are lay people who are getting married. So let's read the paragraph. 26C. A special secretariat, moreover, should be established at the Holy See for the service and promotion of the lay apostolate. It can serve as a well-equipped center for communicating information about various apostolic programs of the laity, promoting research into modern problems arising in the field, and assisting the hierarchy and laity in their apostolic works with its advice. Various movements and projects of the apostolate of the laity throughout the world should be represented in the secretariat, and here clergy and religious also to cooperate with the laity. That's all it says, just kind of give you a general outline of what this Office of the Vatican should do. As noted, it's now called the Dicastery for Marriage, Family, and Life. And this is this whole idea of bringing what we talked about in the prior paragraphs, parochial level to a diocesan level to a worldwide level. And there can be research. There can be ideas of cooperation. For example, the whole time both the Pontifical Council for Laity and the Dicastery both have had a cardinal in charge of them. So obviously he's clergy, he's a bishop and a cardinal and things like that. So that kind of connection. Moving on to our last paragraph today, paragraph 27. It has 3 subparagraphs, but we're going to read them all together. And it is about cooperation outside of the church. So cooperation, I'll give you a little sneak peek. A is about cooperation with other Christians, B about cooperation with non-Christians, and C about the fruitfulness of this. So let's read it. 27A. The quasi-common heritage of the gospel and of the common duty of Christian witness resulting from it recommend and frequently require the cooperation of Catholics with other Christians on the part of individuals and communities within the church, either in activities or in associations in the national and international field. B. Likewise, common human values not infrequently call for cooperation between Christians pursuing apostolic aims and those who not profess Christ's name but acknowledge these values. C. By this dynamic and prudent cooperation, which is the special importance in temporal activities, the laity bear witness to Christ and the Savior of the world, as well as to the unity of the human family. As I noted, A and B are talking about different groups. A is with other Christians and B with non-Christians who agree with us on one point of values and things like that. And I think we have a lot of projects that do this. We have both projects that are good for promoting Christianity. Things like, hey, we're going to do a big Christmas nativity scene in a public park or something like that. That can be done between Catholics and Protestants. There's not really a huge difference in how we're going to tell the Christmas story. Or I've seen a number of places where there's a cooperative organization to help people who are poor or homeless. For example, in my own city, there's a homeless shelter soup kitchen called the Mustard Seed, and it's run by a variety of churches. It's a good idea. There's In From the Cold where the different churches throughout the month have a space for people who are homeless during the winter time. Because in Canada, you can't really sleep outside. Some parts in the mid to southern U.S., you can sleep outside 365 days a year if you're homeless. Canada, that isn't really happening in the colder times of the year. And then B is talking about non-Christians who agree with us on values. This happens in the UN with Muslim countries. We also see it even with atheists. For example, when states are trying to pass assisted suicide legislation, usually the 2 biggest groups who show up are the Catholics and the disability rights activists. And the disability rights activists are often not the most religious, often atheists, things like that, but they realize that these laws are going to target them and make them, and often have people like them killed when they don't want to. They're just going to say, oh, we're not going to pay for all this expensive treatment because it's $10 for you to take these drugs and kill yourself. And that's a huge issue for them. And so it's good that they fight with that, and we should coordinate with them. I personally think that's a good idea. As somebody who is familiar with the disability rights movement more than I think most Catholics, I'm more familiar with autism, but obviously the autism ones, obviously given my own autism, but I am somewhat familiar with it in general as well. And so this idea here is that we should embrace cooperation if we agree on some point, even if we don't agree on everything. And this world, we can sanctify this world, we can bear witness to Jesus in the world, and it's important especially for the laity here, because the laity are meant to go into the world and sanctify it. As a priest, that's not so much my mission. My mission is to bring the sacraments, to teach, to preach, things like that. And my mission is not to go into random employment things, be employed there and bring Christ there. I'm not meant to go into, I don't know, Sikorsky helicopters or Procter & Gamble or anything like that. So thank you for listening to this episode of Vatican II in a Year. This is a listener-supported podcast. You could donate to help Starcross produce it and other great podcasts at sqpn.com/give. You can give one-time monthly or join the Starcross Patreon. Tomorrow we're going to continue with the next paragraphs of Apostolicum Axiositatem, which is 28-29 on lay formation for the apostolate. Please understand to learn more about Vatican II, which provide a blueprint for the Catholic Church. Go to sqpn.com/Vatican, frmatthewlc.com/Vatican, or Vatican SQPN on Facebook and X for more information on the podcast, such as playlists for individual documents and a reading plan. Amen.